The blue flames of Kethmore Prime rose into the night sky like twisted fingers, reaching for help that would never come. Ambassador Velthar stood on the observation deck of the last evacuation ship, watching his world burn below. The crystalline cities that had stood for 10,000 years were now melting under the heat of Coalition plasma bombardment. "Sir, we need to go," Captain Zarath said softly behind him. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. They had been running for 3 days straight, saving whoever they could. Velthar pressed his six-fingered hand against the cold metal of the window. His silver skin reflected the orange glow of the fires below. "They called us peacekeepers," he whispered. "For 3,000 years we kept the galaxy safe. We stopped wars before they started. We protected the weak from the strong." The ship shuddered as another wave of Coalition fighters swept past them. The Hegemony Coalition had come without warning. 5 of the most powerful species in the galaxy had joined together with one goal: destroy the Kethmori completely. "The humans are asking for you on the communication channel," Zarath said. "Captain Chen wants to speak with you directly." Velthar turned away from the burning planet. His tall, thin frame moved with the grace that all Kethmori possessed, even in the darkest moments. "Patch her through." The hologram of Captain Sarah Chen appeared in the center of the room. She was a small human with dark hair and tired eyes. Her uniform was dirty and torn from the fighting. "Ambassador, we have refugee ships coming in from all over the sector. The Coalition is hunting them down one by one." "How many have you saved?" Velthar asked. "Maybe 20,000 so far. We're trying, but our ships are not built for this kind of evacuation." Chen's image flickered as her ship took damage from somewhere. "Ambassador, I need to ask you something. Why did they do this? The Coalition, I mean. Why did they turn on you?" Velthar was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the ship's crew worked frantically to plot their escape route. Through the walls, they could hear the sounds of Kethmori families crying for lost loved ones. "We were too powerful," he finally said. "For thousands of years, when there was a dispute between species, they came to us. We decided who was right and who was wrong. We had the strongest fleet, the best technology, the oldest wisdom. But power makes others afraid, even when you use it to help them." The truth was more complicated than that, and Velthar knew it. 3 months ago, the Kethmori Council had discovered something terrible. The 5 species that made up the Coalition had been secretly working together for decades. They had been starting small wars, creating conflicts, and then asking the Kethmori to solve them. Each time the Kethmori intervened, the Coalition species learned more about their technology and military tactics. It had all been a trap, a way to study their protectors and find their weaknesses. "The Draxian Empire sent us data cores last week," Chen continued. "They said it was evidence that your people were planning to take over the galaxy, but the data looked fake to our computers." "It was fake," Velthar confirmed, "but the other species wanted to believe it. We had been their guardians for so long that they forgot we were people too. They only saw our power and began to fear it." The ship lurched suddenly as they entered hyperspace. Through the communication channel, they could hear alarms going off on Chen's vessel. "Captain, are you safe?" Zarath asked. "We're under attack," Chen replied, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. 3 Coalition cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we turn over the Kethmori refugees." "Give them what they want," Velthar said immediately. "Your people should not suffer for our mistakes." Chen's image became very still. "Ambassador, with respect, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard anyone say." She turned to someone off-screen. "Rodriguez, arm all weapons. Patterson, get those. Refugee ships behind us." "Captain Chen, please," Velthar tried to interrupt. "No." Her voice was firm. 20 years ago, when the Zareth plague was killing millions of humans, who came to help us? When our colonies were starving because we didn't know how to grow food. In alien soil, who taught us? When the Ravager pirates were attacking our trade ships, who drove them away? The communication channel filled with the sound of weapons fire. Chen's ship shook, but she kept talking. It was your people, Ambassador. The Kethmori saved humanity a dozen times over. Now it's our turn to return the favor. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 2 coalition cruisers were destroyed, and the third had retreated. Captain Chen's ship, the UES Defiance, was badly damaged but still flying. The Kethmori refugees were safe. But word of the fight spread quickly through the galaxy. Within days, the Coalition issued an ultimatum to Earth's government. Stop helping the Kethmori terrorists or face the consequences. Velthar watched the news broadcasts from the refugee camp on Luna. One after another, alien species announced they were cutting all ties with the Kethmori. The Altarian Republic closed their borders to refugees. The Centauri Federation froze all Kethmori assets. Even species that had been friends for centuries turned their backs. They are afraid, Zarath said, sitting beside him in the crowded shelter. Around them, Kethmori families huddled together, trying to stay warm in the thin blankets the humans had provided. I do not blame them, Velthar replied. The Coalition is powerful. They can destroy anyone who helps us, but the humans are still fighting. Velthar nodded. Every day, more human ships arrived carrying Kethmori refugees. The Earth government had officially ordered them to stop, but the human military was ignoring those orders. Individual captains, entire fleets, even civilian transport ships were risking everything to save Kethmori lives. Why do they do it? A young Kethmori named Sithal asked. She was barely an adult, one of the few survivors from a research station that the Coalition had bombed. Why do the humans keep helping us when everyone else has given up? Velthar thought about Captain Chen's words. He thought about the human soldiers who shared their food with hungry Kethmori children. He thought about the human doctors who worked 20-hour days treating refugees, even though they could barely understand Kethmori biology. I think, he said slowly, it is because humans understand what it means to be alone. They are young compared to most of us. They have made many mistakes, but they remember what it feels like when no one believes in you. Outside the shelter, another human transport ship was landing. More refugees would find safety tonight, at least for a little while. But Velthar knew this was only the beginning. The Coalition would not stop until every Kethmori was dead or captured, and the humans, stubborn as they were, would not stop trying to save them. The galaxy had turned its back on the Kethmori, all except for one young, foolish, brave species that refused to abandon their friends. The war was just beginning. Captain Sarah Chen stood in front of the largest gathering of Earth's military officers in 50 years. The massive conference room on Luna Station was packed with admirals, generals, and ship captains from every human world. Outside the windows, she could see the Kethmori refugee camps scattered across the moon's surface. The orders from Earth are clear, Admiral Harrison said from the podium. His old face looked tired and angry. We are to cease all refugee operations immediately. The Coalition has threatened to blockade our trade routes if we continue. A wave of angry voices filled the room. Chen could hear officers shouting from every direction. This is wrong! We can't abandon them now! The Kethmori saved us from the plague! Admiral Harrison slammed his hand on the podium. I don't like it any more than you do, but Earth's civilian government has made their decision. We follow orders. Chen stood up slowly. The room became quiet as hundreds of eyes turned to her. She was not the highest-ranking officer present, but everyone knew her name. She was the one who had started this whole mess by saving the first group of Kethmori refugees. Admiral, permission to speak freely? She asked. Harrison nodded, though he looked like he already regretted it. Sir, I have a question about our oath of service. When we swore to protect humanity, did that oath come with a list of exceptions? Did it say we should only help people when it's convenient? When it's safe? When it doesn't cost us anything? The BI room was completely silent now. Chen could feel her heart beating fast, but her voice stayed steady. Because I remember a different oath, sir. I remember swearing to defend those who cannot defend themselves. I remember promising to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Admiral Harrison's face turned red. Captain Chen, you are very close to insubordination. Yes, sir, I know. Chen looked around the room at the faces of her fellow officers. Many of them were nodding in agreement. But I have another question. If we abandon the Kethmori now, what happens the next time someone needs our help? What happens when a weaker species is attacked by stronger ones? Will we help them, or will we calculate the cost first? Commander Torres, the chief engineer, from the shipyards above Mars, stood up. The captain's right. We all know what the Kethmori did for us. Without their medical technology, half of humanity would have died from the Zareth plague. Without their agricultural advice, our colonies would have starved. We owe them our lives. More officers started standing, then more. Within minutes, most of the room was on their feet. This is mutiny, Admiral Harrison said quietly. No, sir, Chen replied. This is conscience. 3 days later, Chen was aboard her ship, the UES Defiance, leading a convoy of 30 human vessels toward the Rigel system. Intelligence reports said there was a Kethmori science colony there, cut off and under attack by coalition forces. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, approached her on the bridge. Captain, we're getting messages from Earth Command every hour. They're threatening court-martial for everyone involved. Chen nodded without taking her eyes off the tactical display. I know. Anyone who wants to turn back can do so. No questions asked. Ma'am, we took a vote. The crew is unanimous. We're with you. The same scene was playing out across human space. Despite official orders to stand down, human ships continued launching rescue missions. Civilian transport companies volunteered their vessels. Private citizens donated money for fuel and supplies. Even Earth's merchant marine began secretly carrying Kethmori refugees between star systems. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working in the refugee medical centers for 2 weeks when she first met healer Mordan. The elderly Kethmori was treating a young human girl who had been injured in a shuttle accident during one of the evacuations. Your people confuse me, Mordan said as he worked. His long, careful fingers moved over the scanner with incredible precision. You risk so much for strangers. Elena watched him work. Kethmori medical technology was centuries ahead of human science, but she had never seen anyone use it with such gentle care. We're not strangers anymore. We're friends. Friends. Mordan repeated the word slowly, as if testing how it felt. In our language, we have 47 different words for various types of relationships, but none of them mean quite the same thing as your word friend. What's the closest translation? Mordan was quiet for a moment. Battle, brother. Someone who stands with you when death is certain. Elena smiled. That sounds about right. The cooperation between humans and Kethmori was growing stronger every day. Human engineers worked alongside Kethmori scientists to modify ships for refugee transport. Kethmori tactical experts helped human captains plan rescue missions through coalition space. Slowly, carefully, they were becoming something new. Not just two separate species helping each other, but a real alliance. Commander Torres was deep in the engineering section of Luna Station when he made the discovery that would change everything. He was working with a team of Kethmori technicians to improve human ship designs when they showed him something incredible. This is your quantum drive system, said tech specialist Kirath, pointing to a holographic display. Very good for a young species, but we can make it better. Torres watched in amazement as the Kethmori engineers began modifying the design. You're increasing the efficiency by 40%. How? Harmonic resonance patterns, Kirith explained. Your people think in straight lines, very logical. But space-time is curved. Work with the curves, not against them. Within days, Torres had teams of human and Kethmori engineers working around the clock. They were not just improving ship designs. They were creating entirely new technologies that neither species could have developed alone. But the Coalition was watching all of this, and they were not pleased. The message came through official diplomatic channels, broadcast to every human world simultaneously. The hologram of High Chancellor Vextar of the Draxian Empire appeared in government buildings across human space. People of Earth, the reptilian alien began, his voice cold and formal. You have ignored our previous warnings. You continue to harbor terrorists and criminals. You have chosen to stand with enemies of galactic peace. Chen watched the broadcast from her ship's ready room. Around her, the crew had gathered to listen. We offer you one final chance, Vextar continued. Surrender all Kethmori refugees to Coalition authority within 72 hours. Cease all military cooperation with the terrorist faction. Do this, and you will be welcomed back into the galactic community with full trading rights and technical exchanges. The alien's image leaned forward slightly. Refuse, and face the consequences. The Coalition has a fleet of 2,000 ships. You have less than 300. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the room in complete silence. Well, Jackson said finally, that's not ominous at all. Chen stood up and activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. You all heard the Coalition's message. They want us to abandon our allies and friends. They want us to betray the people who saved our species from extinction. She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. I'm going to give them the same answer I gave Admiral Harrison. No, not today. Not ever. The cheers from her crew could be heard throughout the ship, and across human space, on hundreds of other vessels, similar scenes were playing out. Humanity had made its choice. The galaxy's most powerful alliance had just declared war on its youngest species. But they had seriously underestimated exactly how stubborn humans could be when they decided to do the right thing. The real fight was about to begin. The first Coalition attack came at dawn on New Geneva, humanity's most important farming world. 3 Draxian dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace without warning and began bombarding the grain storage facilities from orbit. Captain Chen received the emergency transmission while her fleet was escorting a convoy of Kethmori refugees through the Tau Ceti system. The voice of Governor Martinez crackled through the speakers, barely audible over the sound of explosions in the background. They're targeting the food supplies, Martinez gasped. Not the cities, not the spaceports. Just the food. They want to starve us out. Chen closed her eyes and tried to think. New Geneva supplied grain to 20 human colonies. Without those shipments, millions of people would go hungry within months. How long can you hold out? We don't have any warships here, just some patrol boats and cargo haulers. Maybe 6 hours before they finish destroying everything. The refugee convoy Chen was protecting carried 15,000 Kethmori, including many children and elderly. If she abandoned them to save New Geneva, the Coalition hunters would catch them within days. If she stayed to protect the refugees, an entire human world would face starvation. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Jackson said quietly, we have to choose. Before Chen could answer, a new voice came through the communication channel. It was Ambassador Velthar, speaking from the lead refugee ship. Captain Chen, take your fleet to defend your people. We will find another way. Ambassador, if we leave, you hear, you'll all be captured or killed. Then we will die free, Velthar replied simply. Your people taught us that some things are worth dying for. Go save your world. Chen stared at the tactical display for a long moment. 15,000. Kethmori lives versus millions of human lives. The mathematics were clear, but mathematics had never felt so horrible. "Helm, set course for New Geneva," she finally ordered. "Maximum speed." But as her fleet began to turn away from the refugee convoy, something unexpected happened. The Kethmori. Ships did not scatter and run. Instead, they formed up in a defensive formation and began following Chen's fleet. "Ambassador, what are you doing?" Chen demanded. "Coming with you," Velthar said calmly. "Did you think we would let you fight alone?" The battle for New Geneva lasted 18 hours. Chen's 30 ships, supported by a dozen Kethmori vessels, faced off against 3 massive coalition dreadnoughts. It should have been a slaughter. The Draxian ships were each the size of a small city, armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. But the human and Kethmori ships fought like a pack of wolves attacking giants. They used their smaller size and greater speed to dart in and out of weapons range, hitting the dreadnoughts with quick strikes before vanishing again. Commander Torres had installed Kethmori targeting systems on the human ships, making their weapons far more accurate. The Kethmori had learned human tactical flexibility, abandoning their traditional formal battle formations for chaotic guerrilla warfare. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the Draxian dreadnoughts were destroyed, and the third was limping away with massive damage. New Geneva was saved, but at a terrible cost. Chen had lost 8 ships and nearly 3,000 crew members. The Kethmori had lost 4 vessels, including some of their most experienced military leaders. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked for 36 hours straight in the emergency medical stations, treating wounded from both species. She watched human medics learning Kethmori healing techniques, while Kethmori healers adapted human surgical procedures. In the face of so much pain and death, the barriers between the 2 species seemed to dissolve completely. "We cannot win this war," Healer Mordan said to her during a brief break. His silver skin was pale with exhaustion, and his hands shook from too many hours of surgery. Elena looked around at the crowded medical bay. Humans and Kethmori lay side by side on stretchers, some holding hands across the gaps between beds. "Maybe winning isn't the point. Then what is? Proving that some things matter more than survival." The coalition's response to their defeat at New Geneva was swift and brutal. Within a week, they had established blockades around 6 human worlds. No ships could get in or out. No food, no medicine, no supplies of any kind. The blockaded worlds began to suffer immediately. On Kepler Prime, hospitals ran out of medical supplies. On Proxima Station, the hydroponic farms started failing without replacement parts. On New Beijing, children began going to bed hungry as food rations were cut again and again. Earth's government begged the coalition for mercy. They offered to pay massive compensation for the destroyed Draxian ships. They promised to arrest Captain Chen and all the other rogue officers. They even offered to turn over half of the Kethmori refugees as a gesture of good faith. The coalition's answer was always the same: surrender all the Kethmori and the blockades would end. But something strange was happening on the blockaded worlds. Instead of turning against their government or demanding the abandonment of the Kethmori, the human populations became more determined than ever. Families shared their rations with Kethmori refugees. Factories worked overtime to produce supplies for the war effort. Children collected scrap metal for the shipyards. Commander Torres received a message from his brother on Kepler Prime that summed up the human response perfectly. "We're hungry, we're scared, and we're angry. But we're not quitters. Send us more refugees. We'll find room somehow." The turning point came at the Battle of Proxima Junction, the main shipping crossroads for the entire sector. The coalition had assembled their largest fleet yet, over 200 ships from all 5 member species. Their goal was simple: destroy the combined human Kethmori fleet once and for all. Chen commanded a force of only 40 ships, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled for a single battle. Ambassador Velthar led 12 Kethmori vessels. all that remained of their once mighty navy. They were outnumbered 5-1 by enemies with superior technology and firepower. "We should retreat," Admiral Kessatel advised over the communication channel. He was the senior Kethmori military commander, a veteran of 100 battles. "This is not a fight we can win." Chen studied the tactical display. The coalition fleet was arranged in a perfect formation, exactly as military doctrine demanded. It was beautiful, precise, and completely predictable. "Admiral, have you ever seen human children play soccer?" she asked. Kestel's translator struggled with the word. "I am not familiar with this term." "It's a game where you try to get a ball into a goal. Sometimes a small, fast player can get past much bigger opponents by doing something unexpected, something that doesn't follow the rules." Chen opened a channel to all ships in her fleet. "All vessels, this is Defiance. Operation Chaos Ball is now in effect. Every ship for themselves, hit them fast, hit them hard, and don't give them time to think." What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a brawl in space, with human and Kethmori ships, attacking from every direction at once. They ignored formations, ignored targeting priorities, ignored everything their training had taught them. Instead, they fought with pure aggression and desperate creativity. The coalition fleet, trained for formal warfare, could not adapt fast enough. Their communications became overloaded as commanders tried to coordinate responses to attacks coming from everywhere at once. Their formation collapsed as ships tried to turn to face threats from multiple directions. The human ship Indomitable, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, rammed a coalition cruiser rather than retreat when her weapons failed. The Kethmori vessel, Starweaver, used its damaged engines like a bomb, detonating its power core in the middle of a squadron of enemy fighters. When the battle ended 6 hours later, the coalition fleet was in full retreat. They had lost over 60 ships, and their entire command structure was in chaos. The human Kethmori alliance had lost 23 vessels, but they had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had won. News of the victory at Proxima Junction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time since the war began, the coalition seemed vulnerable. Their propaganda had claimed that humanity and the Kethmori were weak terrorists who would collapse at the first sign of real resistance. Instead, they had proven that even the mightiest alliance could be defeated by courage and determination. But the victory came at a terrible price. The coalition's response was to end all pretense of restraint. They began targeting civilian populations, directly bombing refugee camps and attacking unarmed transports. The war was about to become much darker and much more desperate. In her quarters aboard the Defiance, Captain Chen studied the casualty reports from Proxima Junction. 3,000 good people had died to achieve this victory. She wondered how. Many more would die before it was over. Outside her window, the stars looked cold and distant. But somewhere out there, humanity and the Kethmori were writing a new chapter in galactic history. They were proving that friendship could be stronger than fear, and that some things really were worth fighting for. The galaxy was watching now, and for the first time in months, some of them were beginning to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side. The encrypted message arrived at Luna Station in the middle of the night, buried in routine shipping data from the Centauri Federation. Commander Torres almost missed it completely, just a few lines of code hidden in a cargo manifest for grain shipments. But those few lines changed everything. "Captain Chen, you need to see this," Torres said, rushing into the command center where Chen was reviewing casualty reports from the latest refugee convoy attack. "We just received intelligence from inside the coalition. Someone is trying to help us." Chen looked up from the grim statistics on her screen. In the 3 weeks since Proxima Junction, the coalition had become increasingly brutal. They were no longer just attacking military targets. Refugee camps, medical stations, even unarmed civilian transports were being destroyed on sight. "What kind of intelligence?" she asked. Torres activated the holographic display. "Complete battle. Plans for Operation Final Solution. The coalition is planning to attack Earth directly. 200 ships, including their new planet-killer weapons. Chen felt her blood turn cold. When? 2 weeks from now. But Captain, that's not the important part. Look at the source code signature. Chen studied the technical data flowing across the screen. This came from inside Coalition High Command. Someone with access to their most classified information. Not just someone, Torres said grimly. The signature matches Centauri Federation security protocols. One of the Coalition's own founding members is betraying them. The message had been sent by Admiral Genta of the Centauri Defense Force. She was a highly decorated officer who had fought alongside the Keth Mori decades ago, before the Coalition was formed. Her official biography said she had voted in favor of the war against the Keth Mori terrorists. But her secret message told a very different story. I have watched in silence as we destroyed those who once saved us. Her message read, I have followed orders that go against everything I believed in as a soldier, but I cannot stay silent while innocent blood is spilled for political convenience. The truth must be told. Attached to her message were thousands of files, diplomatic records, military communications, and most importantly, recordings of secret coalition meetings from 2 years before the war began. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working in the refugee medical centers when the news broke. She watched the holographic displays with growing horror as the coalition's true plans were revealed to the galaxy. The recordings showed High Chancellor Vexitar of the Draxian Empire speaking to the other coalition leaders. The Keth Mori have become too powerful, he said in the ancient recording. They control galactic politics through their peacekeeping role. Every dispute comes to them for judgment. Every species looks to them for protection. We have become irrelevant in our own galaxy. Another voice. Chancellor Morketh of the Hegemony Union agreed. We need a reason to move against them, something that will make the other species support us instead of them. Manufacture one, Vexitar replied coldly. Create conflicts that require Keth Mori intervention. Study their responses, learn their weaknesses. When we know enough, we strike. The files revealed everything. For 3 years, the coalition had been secretly starting wars just to watch how the Keth Mori would respond. They had supported pirates to attack trade routes, funded rebels to overthrow governments, even released biological weapons on colony worlds, all to force the Keth Mori to intervene and reveal their military secrets. The fake evidence of Keth Mori aggression had been manufactured in coalition laboratories. The terrorist attacks they claimed to have suffered were actually carried out by their own special forces. The entire war had been built on lies from the very beginning. My God, Dr. Vasquez whispered, watching the recordings. Around her, Keth Mori. Refugees were seeing the truth about their people's destruction for the first time. Many were crying. Others sat in stunned silence. Healer Mordan appeared beside her, his silver skin pale with shock. They killed billions of us for political power, he said quietly. They turned the galaxy against us so they could rule without opposition. Elena put her hand on his shoulder. Not the whole galaxy. Some of us still believe in doing what's right. The leaked files had an immediate impact across the galaxy. Species that had supported the coalition began to question their leaders' decisions. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Several smaller governments announced they were withdrawing from the war effort entirely, but the coalition's response was swift and brutal. Admiral Genta was arrested for treason within hours of the leak. The Centauri Federation's government claimed the files were fake, manufactured by human intelligence services. Coalition propaganda networks worked overtime to discredit the evidence, and Operation Final Solution continued on schedule. The attack on Earth began on a Tuesday morning, just as the leaked intelligence had predicted. 200 coalition ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, led by the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion. Captain Chen watched the enemy fleet approach from the bridge of her flagship, now renamed the UES Defiance, in honor of humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender. Around Earth, every human ship that could still fly had gathered for the final battle. 130 vessels, ranging from massive battleships to converted cargo haulers armed with improvised weapons. "It's not enough," Lieutenant Commander Jackson said quietly. "We're still outnumbered almost 2-1. Chen nodded grimly. "Send a message to all ships. If we're going to lose, we're going to make them remember this fight for the rest of their lives." But as the coalition fleet moved into attack formation, something unexpected happened. New ships began dropping out of hyperspace, ships that belonged to neither side. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the approaching vessels. It's the Altarian Republic." The hologram of Admiral Kesivara appeared on the bridge. The bird-like alien looked nervous but determined. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Kesivara of the Altarian Defense Fleet. We have come to stand with you." Chen stared in disbelief. "Admiral, your government officially supports the coalition. Why are you here?" "My government may support them," Kesivara replied, "but I have seen the evidence of their lies. I have read the secret files, and I remember what the Kethmori did for my people during the Crystal Plague outbreak 30 years ago. Some debts can only be paid with honor." More ships continued to arrive. The Tau Cetian Commerce Guild sent a dozen armed freighters. The Independent Miners Union contributed their converted asteroid ships. Even a few vessels from the Centauri Federation arrived, flying under the flag of Admiral Genta's resistance movement. Within an hour, the Human Kethmori Alliance had grown from 130 ships to over 300. It was still not enough to match the coalition fleet, but it was no longer a hopeless fight. Ambassador Velthar appeared on the communication channel from his command ship. "Captain Chen, I am seeing something I thought was impossible. Species from across the galaxy, standing together against tyranny. Your people have done more than save the Kethmori. You have reminded the galaxy what courage looks like. The battle for Earth lasted 3 days. It was not like the chaotic victory at Proxima Junction. This was a grinding, desperate struggle where every ship and every life mattered. The Coalition's planet-killer weapons proved to be devastating, capable of destroying even the largest ships with a single shot. But the Alliance forces fought with a determination that seemed to defy all military logic. Human crews continued fighting even when their ships were falling apart around them. Kethmori vessels used themselves as shields to protect damaged Allied ships. Altarian fighters performed impossible maneuvers to intercept Coalition bombers heading for Earth's cities. Dr. Vasquez found herself aboard a hospital ship in the middle of the battle zone, treating wounded from a dozen different species. She watched humans and Kethmori working side by side to save the life of an injured Altarian pilot. She saw Coalition prisoners being treated with the same care as Alliance soldiers. "This is what the galaxy could be," she said to healer Mordan as they worked together to save a human engineer who had been caught in an explosion. "All of us, working together instead of fighting each other." Mordan nodded as his skilled hands guided the surgical instruments. "Perhaps that is why they fear us so much. Not because we are strong, but because we represent change. A galaxy where power comes from cooperation instead of domination." On the 3rd day of the battle, as Coalition forces finally began to retreat, Captain Chen received an unexpected message. It came from High Chancellor Vextar himself, transmitted on an open channel for the entire galaxy to hear. "Captain Chen," the Draxian leader said, his reptilian features twisted with rage, "you have doomed your species. The Coalition has resources you cannot imagine. We will return with 1,000 ships, 10,000 ships if necessary. We will burn every human world until nothing remains but ash and memory." Chen looked around her damaged bridge at the faces of her crew. They were exhausted, injured, and scared, but they were not defeated. "Chancellor Vexitar," she replied calmly. "You still don't understand what you're fighting against. You think this is about military strength or political power. But it's not. It's about something much simpler than that." The rebellion began on Draxios Minor, a small mining world in the heart of Coalition space. The workers had seen the leaked recordings of their government's lies, and they refused to load another transport ship with weapons destined for the war against humanity and the Kethmori. Within hours, the strike had spread to 12 other worlds. Within days, it had become a full revolution. Captain Chen received the news while her fleet was refueling at Luna Station. The damage from the battle of Earth was still being repaired. Her ship alone had taken over 300 hits, and half her crew was in the medical bay. But the reports coming in from across the galaxy made all their suffering seem worthwhile. "It's falling apart," Commander Torres said, reviewing the intelligence reports. "The Hegemony Union just lost control of their entire outer rim. The Centauri Federation is fighting a civil war. Even the Draxian Empire is dealing with uprisings on 50 worlds." Chen nodded, but she didn't smile. Too many good people had died to get to this point. The war was finally turning in their favor, but the cost had been enormous. "Any word from the Kethmori scouting missions?" she asked. "Ambassador Velthar reports that 3 more refugee fleets have been located and rescued. The total count is now over 2 million survivors, scattered across 100 star systems. They're all heading for the rendezvous point near Alpha Centauri. 2 million survivors out of a population that had once numbered in the billions. The Kethmori had paid a terrible price for the galaxy's political games, but they had survived, and that was what mattered now. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working in the new medical research facility on Luna when she made the discovery that would reshape galactic medicine forever. She had been studying the biological data from dozens of species, trying to find ways to treat the exotic injuries that occurred when different alien technologies interacted in combat. "Healer Mordan, look at this!" she called excitedly, pointing to the data on her screen. "If we combine human stem cell research with Kethmori regeneration techniques and Altarian neural mapping..." Mordan studied the display carefully. His silver skin seemed to glow with excitement as he understood what Elena had found. This could treat spinal injuries in all 3 species, conditions that we thought were impossible to cure. "And that's just the beginning," Elena continued. "If we keep sharing our medical knowledge like this, we could eliminate most genetic diseases within a generation. Cancer, birth defects, even aging itself might become treatable." It was happening in every field. Human engineers were learning Kethmori physics, while Kethmori scientists studied human innovation techniques. Altarian mathematicians worked with human computer specialists to create new forms of artificial intelligence. The alliance born out of war was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a true partnership between species. But the coalition was not finished yet. High Chancellor Vexitar's final gambit came 6 months after the Battle of Earth. Unable to maintain control of his own territory, he gathered the remnants of the coalition fleet, nearly 800 ships, for one last desperate assault. His target was not Earth or any military installation. It was the Alpha Centauri system, where the Kethmori refugees were building their new home. "He wants to finish what he started," Ambassador Velthar said grimly, as he studied the intelligence reports. "If he can destroy the last of my people, he believes the galaxy will forgive the Coalition's other crimes." Captain Chen stood in the observation deck of the space station orbiting New Kethmor, the planet that would become the new Kethmori homeworld. Below, she could see the construction of the first cities, crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the ground like living things, built with a combination of Kethmori architecture and human engineering techniques. "How many ships can we put together?" she asked. "Maybe 400 if we count every vessel in the Alliance," Admiral Kesavara of the Altarian fleet replied. "But most of them are damaged from the recent fighting. We're still outnumbered 2 to 1. Chen smiled grimly. Those are better odds than we've had in most of our battles. The final confrontation took place in the asteroid belt between New Kethmore and its sun. The Coalition fleet arrived in perfect formation, their ships gleaming with fresh paint and new weapons. They looked like an unstoppable force of military precision. The Alliance fleet that rose to meet them was a completely different sight. Human. Ships flew alongside Kethmori vessels, Altarian fighters mixed with Centauri cruisers, and converted mining ships fought beside military dreadnoughts. They had no uniform design, no coordinated tactics, no common command structure. They looked like exactly what they were, a group of friends who had decided to stand together. This is High Chancellor Vextar to the terrorist fleet, came the transmission from the Coalition flagship. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and we will allow the human civilians to evacuate before we cleanse this system of the Kethmori infection. Chen opened a channel to respond, but before she could speak, dozens of other voices began transmitting simultaneously. This is Admiral Kesavara of the Altarian Republic. We reject your terms. This is Captain Entala of the Free Centauri Movement. We stand with our allies. This is Commander Torkesh of the Independent Miners Union. You want to fight someone? Fight us. This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Indomitable. We're not going anywhere. Chen listened to the chorus of defiance and felt something she had not experienced since the war began. Hope. Not just hope for victory, but hope for what would come after. These were not just military allies anymore. They had become something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. This is Captain Chen, she finally said. Chancellor Vextar, you're right about one thing. We are outnumbered. But you forgot to count the most important part of our fleet. What is that? Vextar demanded. The part that's willing to die for something bigger than themselves. The battle lasted 8 hours and ended not with military victory, but with something much more profound. Halfway through the fighting, ships from the Coalition fleet began switching sides. First a few fighters, then entire squadrons, then whole battle groups. They had seen the leaked files. They had watched their leaders lie to them about the reasons for the war. They had been ordered to destroy refugees and civilians and told it was for the greater good. But most importantly, they had seen an alternative, a galaxy where different species could work together instead of dominating each other. By the time the shooting stopped, less than 100 ships remained loyal to High Chancellor Vexitar. The rest had either fled or joined the Alliance. The Coalition, as a political entity, had ceased to exist. Vexitar himself was captured alive when his flagship was boarded by a joint team of human marines and Kethmori warriors. His last words before being taken into custody were a question. How did you win? We had more ships, better weapons, superior technology. Captain Chen looked at the defeated alien leader with something approaching pity. Because you never understood what you were fighting against. You thought this was about military power or political control. But it was never about that. Then what was it about? Chen gestured toward the viewport, where ships from a dozen different species were working together to rescue survivors from damaged vessels. It was about proving that the galaxy doesn't have to be a place where the strong prey on the weak. That different doesn't have to mean enemy. That we can build something better than what came before. 1 year later, Captain Chen stood in the same observation deck above New Kethmore, but the view had changed dramatically. The new cities below were bustling with activity as Kethmori families settled into their new homes. But they were not alone. Human engineers worked alongside Kethmori architects, Altarian traders established new businesses, and children from half a dozen species played together in the crystalline parks. The Galactic Alliance, as it came to be called, was not perfect. There were still conflicts between species, still disagreements about policies and trade rights, but there was also something that had never existed before, a forum where those conflicts could be resolved through discussion instead of war. The galaxy has changed, Ambassador Velthar said, joining Chen at the viewport. Not just politically, but fundamentally. The idea that cooperation can be stronger than domination is spreading to every world. Chen nodded. It's not just about us anymore. Every species that joins the alliance brings new ideas, new perspectives. We're becoming something greater than the sum of our parts. Below them, a group of human and Kethmori children were playing, a game that seemed to involve a lot of running and laughing. Chen couldn't tell where one species ended and the other began. They were just kids having fun together. "You know what the best part is?" she said to Velthar. "What?" "This is just the beginning." The war that had started with the galaxy turning its back on the Kethmori had ended with the birth of something unprecedented, a true partnership between species, built on friendship instead of fear. The humans had kept their promise to stand by their allies, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy a new way forward. Some of the old coalition worlds still refused to join the alliance,